Let's just bring up a foreign story, first of all, because the US has announced it's going to send 200, you may not think that's very many, more military personnel to help fight the Islamic State group in its Syrian stronghold of Raqqa. That comes from the US Defense Secretary. Let's speak to Gareth Browne, who's a freelance journalist who's covering the conflict with the Iraqi army. First of all, just tell us where you are and what's actually happening, Gareth. I know there's a bit of a delay on the line.
Well, I'm in the northern city of Erbil in northern Iraq. We're about 80 kilometres here from Mosul, which is the largest city under the control of the Islamic State. As we know, the Islamic State control a contiguous area which runs from here in the north of Iraq, from Mosul, all the way to the eastern countryside of Aleppo, and that includes, as you said, Raqqa and the city of Deir ez-Zor. They're their two kind of main hubs within Syria.
How much difference will 200 more military personnel make, and what will they be required to do?
Well, when we say military personnel, these guys aren't just bootnicks. These are US Special Forces, and they're going to gather with 300 US Special Forces that are already on the ground in Syria. These guys make a very, very significant difference. They are the best of the best in US terms. Officially, they'll be training, they'll be guiding missiles and generally offering advice to the Syrian Democratic Forces. This is a coalition of Kurdish and Arab fighters, which has made a lot of headway in pushing back the Islamic State in northern Syria recently. Now, officially, they won't be in a combat role, but what I'm seeing on the ground here is it's more and more likely that they will be playing combat roles. You just can't predict when and where the Islamic State are going to attack and where they're going to be. So it's likely that they will play some sort of some sort of role in the conflict.
And how easy is it to gauge, as we're being told, that the war against ISIS is almost won?
It's certainly not almost won. We're moving in the right direction. Iraqi forces are starting to push back ISIS in the city of Mosul, but it's taking a long time and it's proving very, very costly. Just this week, the Iraqi Army's 9th Division opened up a new front in the southeast of Mosul, and it looked like things were going well. They pushed more than a kilometre into the city, and then all of a sudden they were surrounded by ISIS fighters, and they lost more than 60 men in just a few hours, and that's just on one day of fighting. Similarly, in Syria, we're seeing them use these guerrilla tactics, car bombs, booby traps, snipers, which is making the fight against them painfully slow. So they are being pushed back, yes, but there's many months to go until Syria and Iraq are rid of the Islamic State.
And just one final point while you're on, Gareth. I'm speaking to Gareth Browne. He's a journalist covering the conflict with the Iraqi army. How close to a resolution is the conflict at Aleppo?
My personal opinion is it's miles and miles away. If there's one thing I've learned from covering Syria, and particularly Aleppo over the past few years, it can always get worse. There are a lot of, the Russians and the Syrian regime like to paint the people remaining in eastern Aleppo as terrorists. There are a lot of people there who, they're not terrorists, but they're simply not going to give up the fight for freedom. Of course, this was a popular revolution just a few years ago, and there's still embers of that mentality. And to think that these people are just going to lay down their arms and walk out of the city is a little bit naive. So I think even Aleppo, where it seems like we're seeing some sort of ceasefire perhaps come into play, that the battle there is far from over.
Gareth, thank you very much indeed. Be safe. Gareth Browne, who's a freelance journalist covering the conflict with the Iraqi army. And I have to say, rather him than me, don't you?